The day I killed my marriage counselor. My husband John and I were performing neurotic folk rock songs at a tiny coffee house the night our counselor, Nicole, fatally injured her reputation as someone who could help us have a better marriage, falling off her pedestal to her professional death. While John and I were performing, we were pleasantly surprised to see Nicole and her husband walk in. At the time, I saw her as someone who had it all. A great marriage, 2 adorable little boys, and a thriving counseling practice. During one of our sessions, Nicole had helped me to see that I was controlling in my marriage. We talked at length about my dysfunctional family of origin, and John's too. That was how we were going to get to the root of the problem and fix it, by healing the old wounds we had from our upbringing. She told us I needed to learn to let go and trust John more, and he needed to step up and take more initiative. Then we'd finally have more harmony and less fighting, and I wouldn't be so exhausted all the time. We'd been doing our best to follow her instructions, but nothing seemed to be improving. At the coffee shop, John and I finished our first set. After John set his guitar down, Nicole turned to her husband and said, "Why don't you go up there and play Landslide while they're taking a break?" Her husband shook his head emphatically. "Oh, come on," Nicole insisted. "You do it so well." He declined again and began to look alarmed. "Just go up there and play it," she finally ordered him. Looking stricken and terrified, this time he obeyed. After picking up John's guitar, he began a halting version of Landslide that made everyone feel just as uncomfortable as he looked. Halfway through, he stalled, looked at Nicole pleadingly, and then excused himself to rejoin the audience. That's when it hit me. At least one reason this counseling hadn't worked was that Nicole had the same problem I did. She, too, was controlling. And it was hard to imagine her husband taking any initiative. After all, we just witnessed him being unable to refuse her even when the consequence was humiliation. Nicole couldn't help us because she didn't know herself how to have the kind of relationship I wanted. John and I had been feeling a little hopeless, going to counseling week after week when things weren't improving. We naturally thought it was us, that we were the problem. But it stands to reason that taking marriage advice from someone with a troubled marriage not only doesn't help, it can actually do harm. Without that glimpse of Nicole interacting with her husband, I might never have known that her seemingly happy marriage was riddled with tension and bickering, just like mine. For the first time, I realized that no marriage and family therapy credential could guarantee that the bearer would have a happy, lasting, intimate marriage. I felt like I'd been getting the equivalent of personal training from a couch potato with a spare tire, or financial advice from someone who was about to file for bankruptcy. Even though John and I had invested over $9,000 in her services, I knew at that moment that we were done with Nicole. I resolved in the future to only take advice from women who had the kind of relationship I wanted. And in fact, because counseling wasn't improving my marriage, I had already started asking women who had been married for a long time about their secrets for a happy marriage. Their answers were like nothing I'd ever heard before. They had advice that didn't even make sense to me at first. It wasn't the same as counseling at all.